So hello and welcome to this session on RPA. Session lasts about 50 minutes. I'm your host. I think some of you will recognise me. I'm Kevin Cunnington, the former head of GDS here in the UK and the UK's digital envoy. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the panellists to introduce themselves, if I may, passing right to left.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is John Nelstrop. I'm the Departmental Record Officer and Head of KIM in Treasury.
Hi, everybody. My name is Henrikka Tammes, and I'm from Finland. I work for the Ministry of Finance at the ICT department.
You should do a little bit about your background until we come back. That was fortuitous, actually, because I didn't give the correct instructions. So we're supposed to introduce ourselves and just say a little bit about ourselves, if that's all right, by way of introduction.
Did I not say enough?
No.
You want more?
No,
Okay.
yeah, a little more. Yeah, a little more.
So a little bit more. So I've been a civil servant for more than 20 years, worked in a few different areas. I trained as a scientist, but now I work in knowledge management, and I've been in Treasury for 7 years. As a little bit of a taster, so I was told to present for 3 minutes, but I'm just going to give a little taster before my 3 minutes, because we've got 6 apparently. So I'm going to be presenting on record transfers, digital record transfers to TNA. And in my head, when I started on this journey, I felt like this could be a government strategy, how to manage the risks of reviewing and releasing information into the public domain. So I realised, though, that maybe not all of you are records people or information people. So when I speak, if you're not one of those recordsy people, then I'll just ask you to kind of take your own lens over what I'm saying, because I'm certain the kind of things that we've been developing, there are other applications for it. But we have to keep our focus on doing what we're doing. But so if you see something that you like, or if you want a whole one of it, then I'd be more than happy to talk afterwards about how you can get your hands on some of the stuff that we've invested in for HMG.
Very good. Henrikka, could you introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah. So actually, I have a little bit different background, because originally I studied to be a nurse, and I worked a couple of years at the local healthcare center, and I noticed that I wanted to develop the things that we were doing there. And then I switched. I learned a little bit more. I went to university back, studied public administration and political science, and then I started working for the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. And after that, the Prime Minister's office. So I have a little bit different background, and also a little bit maybe more people-centered view in my answers.
Brian, all the way from America.
That's right. Thank you, Kevin. My name is Brian Epley. I'm the Principal Deputy CIO for the United States Department of Energy. I've got a unique background, 25 plus years working in information technology. Is that my call? Is my time up, John?
No. I'm saying hi to more of my team who keep showing up.
25 years of IT and public-private sector, but my experience is unique because I've also worked in state government and currently in the federal government. And I think that's an interesting blend, because that's what our audience is comprised of. I'm interested here to talk about RPA, but I really wanted to highlight what our unique mission is at what we call DOE, the Department of Energy. It is obviously all about energy. It's about national security, but there's a huge underpinning element of science and research that goes back decades. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're doing in our labs, our national labs, which is the United States Treasury, that's specific not only to RPA, but will lean into a lot of AI, artificial intelligence. My day job as the Principal Deputy CIO is I work with our CIO, Ann Duncan, to set the vision and strategy for the department. The Department of Energy is very unique, not only in what I described, but it's made up of 17 national labs, and then we have roughly 36 department elements, program offices to drive and lead the mission that's very diverse and unique, not only across the nation, but internationally with our partners. We're deep in academia. That's probably where we got a lot of our roots, 75 years ago. But we provide IT services, and that's where RPA is a cross-section in today's topic. So thank you, Kevin.
And Mark.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Mark Palmer. I work for Visa, and I'll explain in a moment why on earth a guy from Visa sat on this stage to talk to you about robotic payment process automation in a minute. A couple of words about myself, which is vaguely interesting in this subject. I graduated with a degree in electronic engineering in 1983. I know that's hard to believe. That was more than 40 years ago. And in my final year, we were taught about robotic process automation and machine learning. This is nothing new. And in fact, even then, machine learning was not new. It was coined by a computer scientist in the 1950s. So all of a sudden, we're all talking about AI and machine learning like it's just suddenly occurred. It hasn't. But what is new is the huge amount of low-cost compute and storage and technologies to enable us to deploy these technologies. When I learned in the 80s, we just didn't have that available. So now it's come of age, and now we're starting to look to how we can really deploy these technologies into government use cases. I spent my whole career, 40 years, working in the technology industry, serving government customers of all sorts. So I've got some interesting stories, if any of you have time afterwards, about deploying technology across the public sector. Why Visa? Actually, we deployed the first artificial intelligence models on our payments networks over 30 years ago. So when you tap a card, any card, to come here on the tube or the bus or the tram or the boat, that was Visa technology behind the scenes, evaluating whether, first of all, your card is valid, you've got money on it, your bank does let you pay with that card, and processes that transaction in under 200 milliseconds to open the gate and let you in, and then reconcile that payment for Transport for London. So we're actually a technology company, and that's one example of the kind of technologies we deploy. Everyone knows us because of our name on a card that a bank may issue you. We don't issue cards because the founder of Visa had the foresight to put the brand name on a card. So consequently, we are associated with cards. Even though we're not a card issuer, we're a technology company. But I think that's enough from me, Kevin.
Yeah, very good. So the plan is I'm going to ask one or two questions of the panel to get us started. If you've got burning questions in between or clarifications in between, I'm sure Raquel has a microphone at the back, so just stick your hand up. So without further ado, our first question is the classic. What did you learn from the deployment of automation? And what would you have done differently? If you wouldn't mind starting us off, Brian, because it seems a bit unfair to go all the way back to Mark, and then we'll see how the volunteering goes as we go.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. I've got 75 points I wanted to go through. If you could cue the lights, and I'm just kidding. So as I mentioned, the Department of Energy has a deep history that goes back 75 years, and I'm going to try and jump forward to RPA. I think the topic of discussion as it relates to today, here we are, it's really a focus on delivery, data automation, and effective decision-making. RPA is taking existing recurring tasks and automating those. So what we're looking at is how we can automate a lot of daily tasks. The depth of DOE, and I think the unique aspect that we bring to the table, is all of the history. As my colleagues pointed out, it's got a deep history, not just in Visa, in Finland, and in other areas, but also how we started in AI and ML and how it actually applies to our mission. What does that mean? So our labs do 90% of the research and development for the United States government. So that's Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and in the science aspect, we're looking at, more recently, COVID-19. We have, the United States has the first exascale compute in the world. That's the fastest computer, called Frontier. It's in our Oak Ridge National Lab. We use that to actually compute and do science research on COVID-19 and the development of that virus. We're also using that to support NOAA, the National Oceanic and Weather Administration, to look at weather modeling. We're working with another lab to conduct cancer research. So those are just three examples that are in the science realm. of research, leveraging compute. How does that relate to RPA? It's a far distant element of that, but I think that research and development is nearly 10 years on the forefront of what's going to affect us today. And so the Department of Energy is looking at how those things will realize or transfer to daily activities. And I think the focal point for us today in the discussion of RPA is how does it affect, for me, it's the American citizens, it's the general population that are going to use services, not just automation of IT tasks. My colleague Enrique, referenced, I think, some of the benefits in your background in healthcare. Those are some examples that may resonate with you all. The challenge that we have faced in DOE and the implementation is really on the front end of research and science. I think the core of your question, Kevin, is when you actually get to implementation. So what I refer to is that tech transfer. And we have challenges with that in our daily basis at DOE and headquarters. We're trying to leverage chatbots so that you can actually get closer to self-service. That's in-house, but that's also reaching our citizens, public-facing. So we develop a lot of that and look through that lens. What were the other elements of that?
The other bit is, what would you have done differently in hindsight?
Wow. We need a couple more days to dig into that. So difference, I think, I've heard it in a number of the sessions earlier today. There's a common theme, and I say this because I feel passionate about it. The underpinning element is data, and we have to get data right. And what I mean by that is today we're playing a lot of cleanup and scrubbing that data so that we're not creating misinformation, we're not creating environments that are susceptible to bad actors. And I think that it's not that we did something wrong, but we're playing a little bit of catch up. So I think that if I were to do it again, it would look at what the data models are going to look like in 5 years, X years, and that out point. I think that the session that I was in just before lunch was on innovation and data, and our federal CIO, Claire Monterano, was talking about cybersecurity. We have to bake in cybersecurity, not just the data lens, but those two are critical. A third element that I would bring up that I didn't hear, and I'm surprised, is identity. The identities that we all share not only protects the privacy of our individual data and information, but also how we access it. Those are I think the trifecta of what we have to focus on. So if I were to redo it, I would definitely bring a key focus to those.
And Mark, just so we don't make you last all the time, would you mind going second?
A couple of quick ones then. I would always pilot something. Don't proof of concept anything. There's no concepts to prove. The technology's been around a long time, but pilot. But actually, before you start the pilot, go to what I call the edge, your customers, the very people who use your service, and then your customer-facing staff to understand the processes that are problematic to either your customers or your staff. There's no point automating a bad process. So that's the first thing I would say. Start at the edge. Then once you've figured out which processes you need to improve, and this is not necessarily a rip and replace, but improve is the term. Incremental improvement, I think, is key. And part of that is, as you say, Brian, having the right data. I remember replacing and automating the entire UK's vehicle licensing, car tax program over 20 years ago. Any of you from the UK here will know now you just go online, it just happens.
Yep.
We had to engineer the whole insurers database, and the hardest part was the MOT database, because that automatically checks that your car's got a valid test certificate and that it's insured before it will issue a tax disc. In the old days, you had to get a bit of paper. You don't even do that anymore. Yeah. That required a huge amount of analysis of those databases to make sure the data was clean, the process could be effective. We trialed it on a small population first and then started to roll it out on national scale. But once we'd proved it on a small section of the population, we scaled it really quick with the DVLA. I don't know if there's anyone here from the DVLA, but this is a bit of our history. But I've learned those lessons on that project, which we still carry forward today.
Very good, thank you. Data's appearing large, isn't it, already? Enrique, then John, if that's okay.
Yeah, I could maybe a little bit of a different point of view, but about the learnings that we found. For example, we learned that it's so important to kind of like involve the people who are doing the process already, so we can get the knowledge where do we use actually RPA? What are the good basic examples? And by by doing that involving, I mean that at the Finnish Social Insurance Institution, they made this different kind of innovation that they learned normal civil servants who didn't have a technological background with the basics of RPA, so that they could use the knowledge of where can can you automate your routine tasks, and gave kind of like the ball to the public servants that if you have something at your work that you think that should be automated, we probably should do that.
Yes.
So it's called RPA Godparents, and it's kind of like the process that also the public servants who were willing to learn about the RPA basics are also teaching the lessons to their co-workers, because usually I have noticed that the tech people and the non-technical people doesn't necessarily communicate that how would I describe it, that easily. Sometimes it works quite well, but you need sometimes these puzzles between those two types of people.
John.
So my problem was I had to transfer a load of digital records to the National Archives, and in 2016 they all became in scope, and we didn't have a solution. So and there wasn't a solution. The last 4 years we've transformed our position, and I guess one of the things I would encourage you guys to think about, and the thing I learned was you can really collaborate across government, and it really works, and bring things together. So we did all the work. I wasn't going to mention this. We did all the work, or a large chunk of it, during lockdown, and so we couldn't actually meet the people who I've ended up working with, but still we were able to work and make things happen. I think other things we learned, so don't worry about what you don't know. There's not a lot you can't learn, I think. So I think you'll come to problems and you go, God, I just don't know how to fix this. That's fine. That's probably a good space to be in. And just get learning and get people around you to help you learn. I think, whilst we're talking about technology, actually, my experience tells me that it's all about people. And so if I wasn't able to work effectively and bring people together, if we as a team couldn't work effectively with our stakeholders and bring them on the journey, it doesn't work. And what else? Oh yeah, so I heard a theme from yesterday, don't forget your brains. So this stuff, the way that we're implementing this, it's assistive. It doesn't replace you. So we're using AI technology to create efficiencies and to manage kind of the administrative aspects. So particular challenges we have are like volumes, a magnitude increase in volumes for processing. That is another people thing. People don't do what you tell them to do, and so we ended up with a digital heap, not a nice curated data set. So sorting out your data, I think, is essential when you're going into these kind of things. Clean in, clean out. Don't be surprised if things are broken. So if you're dealing with old data or not clean data, you might find that some of your data is corrupted. But again, don't worry. There's things you can do to fix that. I'll stop there for now. Yeah.
Very good. And we've wandered happily into the people issue, because technology is never about technology, it's always about the people. Maybe if we continue that theme and start with Brian and Mark around what impact have you seen on the workforce? What impact have you seen on the customers from a human people perspective?
A couple of quick words then. I think first thing I would say is that people can generally focus on more the challenging tasks that need real human intervention. So rather than dealing with the traditional and regular case workload, for example, but dealing with the really urgent cases or really difficult cases. So it enables humans, I think, to shift to where they're mostly needed and leave the machine to the mundane tasks. I mean, we see this in the clinical world, where machine learning is now regularly used to evaluate medical scans or images, and triage is a medical term. It's essentially triaging. So the priority cases that need the most urgent review or complex intervention by a clinician are put to the top of the pile. And essentially that's what happens in caseworking. And I think it therefore enables people to work on more meaningful tasks and therefore feel like they're giving more value in their daily work.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk in the press in various areas about ambient AI. Is that a topic anyone's familiar with? It's where AI sits in the background, listening to meetings, making notes, reading your instruments, collating a summary. Brian, people.
Great question, Kevin. There's a lot to unpack there as well. I think of people primarily through this discussion as the workforce, but I think it's important to recognize that may be only one dimension of the relationship. I think what's crucial to all of us is the citizen or the customer. It's the people on the other side.
Yeah.
It's the service delivery aspect of that relationship. I think that just in this panel's discussion, there's not only a work set shift, my words that Mark just referred to, but there's also a mindset shift that has to happen. One of our labs, the Pacific Northwest National Lab, is actually working to develop a human-machine type relationship. And that, I think, speaks volumes to what I'm referring to. Happy to share any of the details there. One of the things that people, and I think John mentioned it as it relates to people, is collaboration. It's critical for us, not only in RPA, AI, but all of the topics that we're discussing this week at this event really are critically dependent on collaboration. But I want to pull the thread on the human-machine piece. RPA is critically dependent on the human loop that is going to take the existing process and procedures and automate that through RPA and other tools like AI and ML. And it's that mindset shift, that role work shift that has to occur for us to realize the benefits, learn from it, not only change the implementation, but realize the benefits as they evolve over time. That's the cycle that we have to go through. I think that there's also an underpinning element of the people question, and it's going to change, whether we're working directly with machines or we are the operator of that relationship that's gonna push that service delivery. We have to realize what's on the other end of this, and we have to have human checks to verify what we have developed is producing the outcomes that we need, and we're gonna have to relive that cycle as it continues to evolve over time.
And Enrica and John, you spoke a lot about the people issues. Is there anything more you want to add?
Yeah, I would say that, of course, because now when in Finland we are using RPA quite a lot, we are quite a technical country, and it has increased the time for the people, kind of like when the customer services, civil servants doesn't have to just communicate with the computer. It's many times that you are basically seeing then the other one is just like typing something and not maybe talking with you, but now it's shifting that you have, as a civil servant, you have more time to give to the people who actually needs and wants the human interaction also.
Yeah. John?
I think, so I'm doing a leadership course now, and part of it just keeps coming back to change, but I think actually when you're introducing these things, think about the change management that you're introducing and how does it cascade. So picking up on Brian's idea of different customers. When I was working in defense, we had this concept of customer one and customer two. And I quite like that concept, even though it's kind of outdated now. But so in my chair, I can regard customer one as TNA, because these are the guys who say, yes, I'll accept what it is that you've thrown over the digital fence to me. But actually, customer two is the one that actually matters, and that used to be the soldier who would pick up the stuff, who would do stuff with it, but now it's the general public. And so in the considerations of the change that we were doing, digital records look completely different to paper records. People are not used to reading those, and so how can we present these to our citizens in ways that they can consume these that is more natural to them? So whilst it's it's shaped differently. This is what I was meaning about the curation. So we had a heap, and we had to then create some meaning, structured meaning into that, so that our customer twos could actually make sense of any of it. Just on the workforce, then I think introducing this was actually quite disruptive for us. It felt a bit kind of displacing, and I think my team would kind of, if any of you bump into them, they'll agree, because we had to refigure out who's doing what. And so don't be surprised if it changes. I think there's layers of change as well as there's layers of customers. And so you have to think that through carefully. How are you going to work together? How are you going to bring your stakeholders on board? And how are your customers actually going to consume whatever it is that you're producing?
Very good. Thank you, Henrietta.
Yeah, just one idea came to my mind while I was saying that people want to have interaction. Not all the cases it's like that. Sometimes they just want to deliver the process quickly and get the impact or output from the process. And I use an example that we have actually automated the immigration. If we are having university students to Finland to come to the universities, we have automated the permit system so that if the terms are met in the applications, that everything is okay, like the similar way that the public servant would have checked all the things in the application has been okay. So then now the automation uses or make the permit so it's delivered to the person quite quickly, compared that you have to wait that the person is doing the same job as the machine.
Very good. Mark, and we'll come back. Sorry, Brian, did you want to?
No, go ahead. I just wanted to add, go ahead.
Go for it.
Please.
I was going to come back to the far end, Mark, and change the topic slightly and talk about benefits and risks. Benefits first, and then what goes wrong normally. Tell us.
Well, technology can have a habit of going wrong if it's not managed carefully and deployed thoughtfully, particularly with all the change management wrapped around it. No one deploys a technology project for the fun of it. There must be a business reason, and there must be a business change program wrapped around it. So without that, that's where programs can go wrong. So I've seen that happen in my career. So having a thoughtful change management program around it, I would say, is really critical. I mean, the benefits, we're seeing it in our daily life. Anything to reduce friction, to speed things up, to make our lives easier. As human beings, we're generally a bit lazy. We'll go the easy route. And so we don't like things that are a lot of hassle, form filling, endless interviews, call centres. We don't like waiting on a telephone, et cetera, et cetera. So anything that reduces all of that friction and time in our lives, there's got to be a benefit for citizens accessing government services. But it goes to the point that governments have to serve all citizens. Unlike businesses, governments cannot choose who you serve. And governments are largely there to serve the most vulnerable in society, as well as keep us all safe and provide healthcare and education. And so it's the most vulnerable that really need government's protection. And I think being able to enable the vulnerable part of the population to access government services easier and feel less isolated from society. In my world, we're looking at payments, welfare payments. So we look at how we get more vulnerable segments of the population digital payments more effectively, while still giving them access to alternative means such as cash, but meaning that they can actually use those funds effectively in any supermarket, grocery store, wherever they choose, to pay for the goods for their daily needs, but in a digital way so that it's more secure. But also the benefit for government is there's lower cost in managing all of that. So I think it's important to look at segments of the population being served and their needs.
And you talked very specifically about a DWP example and employment. If you had to put a number on the kind of benefit, when we started doing digitisation way back in 2013 here in the UK, we used to estimate that digitisation saved about 30% on the equivalent of paper form filling, largely because it was a more streamlined process, but also it kind of eliminated a lot of the mistakes people would normally make in filling in forms. What's your sense of the benefits of RPA or different forms of automation as a...
Well, there's different numbers. There's, for example, there's fraud and error, as you rightly say, Kevin. People forget the error part, and again, humans make errors, all of us. I've heard fraud numbers of £6 billion a year banded around. Either way, it's big numbers, and every government has fraud challenges. On that side, data is key to addressing fraud. If you've got good data, you can identify fraud much easier and use AI or RPA-type technologies to identify potential fraudulent cases or outliers. So it depends on the numbers you're looking at, but then there's the actual, person days, the amount of time and effort on casework on average. And I think reducing that, I'm personally going through a personal independence PIP claim for one of my family and supporting them. Yep. And that has so far taken me 3 months and probably about a day a week to go through as a citizen. So there's a long way for DWP to go yet, and automating some processes. That particular process is particularly complicated, so probably the last to be automated.
Henrika, can you give us a good example from your work of something that's gone well and what the benefits of that have been?
Yeah, well, I was just, you said so many things that already came to my mind that maybe I skipped this one.
Yeah, well, hand over to Brian, if that's okay, Brian. Give us a good example of something that will resonate with the audience. I'm going to
take a slightly different perspective on this. I heard the question slightly different. So benefits is where you started.
Yeah.
Some risks, and I think that it's a balancing act. But leading with the benefits, it's, I like your term, laziness. That's just a natural aspect of it. But one of the benefits of RPA and AI, ML is really just through the automation. So speed to market. We're able to bring services, products to our citizens, to I'll call it the consumer. That's one aspect of it. I think that the other benefit that we're seeing on the digitization journey is that there's reusability. But let me pause there because I mentioned risk and there being a balancing act. As we automate things, we need to ensure that we're doing them in a consistent, repeatable manner. Otherwise, all of us may be chasing after the same problem and solving it 4 or 5 different ways. That's wrought with risk, not just fraud and errors potentially. But I want to maybe highlight and weave in the data element. While we went through a digitization journey, the data has not always been composable and reusable. And I think that's the next aspect, the next benefit on that journey, where we really need to ensure that the data is clean and rich and reliable so that as we continue down this automation, RPA, AI, ML journey, we're getting the full benefit and we're balancing the risk that comes with that.
And we haven't talked about legacy much, but before I ask John to answer the last question, not the legacy question, the last question, we're going to start to pass the microphone around. So if you want to speak as soon as John's finished, would you mind putting your hand up so we've got a bit of an idea as to where to get to, please? So, John, benefits, risks.
Does any of you have large volumes of information that you might want to understand what's in it? Anybody got any of that stuff in their lives?
I think there's a lot.
So only one person. Okay, the rest of us don't care. It's great.
There you
go. Do any of you need to? I don't know. So let's just look at that one thing. So if you've got a large volume of information and you don't know what's in it, well, I do have a solution because I had, my starting block was 7.8 million records. We knew we didn't know about them. We knew that some of them didn't have any dates to them. We didn't know how many. When you're transferring to the National Archives, you have to do it by date. So not having a date's a bit of a showstopper. So if you find that some of you, have any of you come across things you can't open because it's a bit old? So if you've got large data problems where you need to clean it up, I think one of the benefits of the work that we've done is actually that's a kind of prerequisite before we start our process. So we've kind of created a semi-automated set of processes that can clean up your data. So my intent for me, my benefit for me is I'm going to circle around to operational data and go, well, can I make the starting block or a less bad heap? So if you want a less bad heap, then there might be some benefits. I think risks, specific to me, the risk is inappropriate release. So digital information is a bit more tricky than paper. Paper is what you see is what you get. It's just on the surface. Digital has layers and other attributes to it that you need to surface. Has anybody done like a screen grab of their screen ever and like then cropped it down just to show the little bit that they want to put in their PowerPoint slide? Yeah, you done that? That's okay, because I can expand out your screen all over again because it's all still there. Has anyone reused someone's slides and then just get rid of those because that's a bit dicey, and I'll put my stuff on top? It's all gone now, isn't it? No, it's not. So there are some risks in things that we do every day that we've kind of uncovered in just the way we handle information. I think we haven't mentioned it at all. I haven't heard it mentioned, but ethics and standards. So when we start looking at this kind of automation, we need to think through about how we apply those standards in what we do so that for our customers and for our citizens, it's appropriate for the tasks that we're using and everyone understands how things are working.
Very good. I'm going to stand up so I can see where the microphone is, if that's okay. Do we have a volunteer with a question? We haven't talked much about legacy. We haven't talked much about provenance of data. I think that is one of the big issues, certainly in my experience in the UK civil service, that we had the data, but we didn't know where on earth we'd got it from or what time we recorded it. The gentleman in the far corner with the microphone.
Hello, Kevin. It's H. Patel, DWP. I don't know how much it affects RPA specifically, but in the context of AI and machine learning, to what extent do you think senior leaders and people developing these systems think about, I guess, prejudices that are in the data already that reflect prejudices in society, and to what extent systems then reinforce those? So I'm thinking like gender, race, and pretty much anything else you might want to think of, as well as the coders themselves. Because if there isn't adequate diversity in the people developing these systems, they're going to use their own biases and prejudice, and we think of this as all being objective, but it still comes down to who's coding and how. So just any reflections on that side of things, and to what extent the industry is thinking about these kinds of issues?
Thank you, H. It's an old question, isn't it? And AI is notorious, really, or machine learning is at least notorious for bias within the algorithms. Does anybody want to talk to eliminating bias?
I'll say a couple of words. I think we should start with the premise that all humans have some kind of bias built into us. So you've just got to accept that as a premise. And so when you're training a model, which is essentially what you have to do in machine learning, you have to train the model to detect the patterns you're looking for. You need different kind of people with different kind of backgrounds. I've actually used teams from different continents actually training models for me in the past to try and eliminate bias. But you've got to accept that human beings are biased in some form or other and try and work that out. But you've just got to keep testing and looking for that at the end of the day. And that's part of the work, I would say, is in the testing, particularly around the particularly socioeconomic groups, and looking for those bias traits or patterns and doing your testing very thoroughly.
And Brian, it looked like you wanted to say a few words.
Sure. H, I'll take a different spin on this. The bias is obviously unavoidable. And I agree with Mark. We'll continue to evolve and learn from that in terms of how we can ensure that the data sets and language models are not as wrought with bias. But I would look at the other side of that same coin and just use the term context. And what I mean by that is, are we talking public facing, or are we talking internal, and how we actually develop whatever our mission or business may be focused on? And I think we have to be cognizant of those different dimensions, because they also bring an attributable type bias that may not be applicable. And we may apply similar rigor and discipline to ensure that the biases have been worked out, but some cases we may not. And that really highlights the risk and the dependency of that human loop. And I think that we're going to have to bring multiple lenses through this, not to get it perfect, but to get it as right as it can be at a given point in time, and then have reviews to maintain that data integrity over time.
And Henrika and John, any thoughts?
I guess I'd just kind of refer back to like standards and transparency. So I think that we need to figure out how to be transparent in our calculations that these machines are doing, and that it's transparent that a calculation is being used. I think those kind of it fits into that ethical kind of bucket that I mentioned, and I think that I don't think we're at the end of that. So yeah, we'll need to learn as we go, I think.
I think we've got time for one further question, so you might be the... Oh, we've got 2 volunteers though, have we? We'll make time for 2 questions, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Thank you. Great conversation, central government. And my question is about the supply chain in terms of, we can talk about the software that we're building, but one of the big perceptions we get is the problem of the software that is being included, the libraries, the content, and the potential tampering, the potential biases that are in those libraries beyond the structure. And it's not necessarily just what we build, because we've got slightly more control over that, but is then the large COTS, the large web applications, effectively the cloud applications now as a cloud-first viewpoint. And it's how you actually then deal with those third-party organizations to understand their bias, their provenance, their ability to deal with it. How are you addressing those areas?
You were nodding most vigorously, Brian. You might have to go first.
I have a lot of thoughts about that. It takes us back to the earlier discussion about people and really collaboration. But your response or question really focuses on supply chain, and I take a different look at that. So I led with people and collaboration. I didn't say, but partnership is critical there. That channel or partnership that we may create may or may not be applicable to my peers. And I think the biases that you were trying to tease out, at least what I heard, is where there's concern or, I don't know, opportunity maybe. I think we need to look at how that is applicable and maybe reusable, and recognize why something may not be reusable. But you were talking about software development, and I think that there's not only a life cycle context to that through the development process, but also as it becomes legacy. I'm pointing back to what Kevin had tried to tease out. I think that I'm trying to get back to the bias aspect of that. We need to understand what the Department of Energy's mission is and what your mission may be in the private sector. What's your mission? What's your business? Not just from a profit and loss, but where do we share some common interest and priorities? And that's going to maintain the integrity that we need for you to be successful and for me to be successful, and maybe how you're going to make that repeatable and reusable for other use cases, other customers, other clients, and how we're going to manage that over time. Is that in line with your question, or?
Yeah, that gives me the context to that.
Okay, great.
So if we can move to the final question, which I thought was somewhere there-ish. There's lots of people pointing in different directions, but if you've got a question, could you stick your hand up just to make life simple for us?
Oh, sorry for the confusion. The question asked just before was similar to what I was going to ask. Over here. Hi.
Oh, hello.
Sorry, I'm Sarah from Building Digital UK. I guess this question probably is more for John, but it was, where do you see governments like most inefficient? Because I think most of the things we're all talking about, I can see it fully applied in respect of frontline services and customers, but I'm in strategy, and I guess I work with policy colleagues as well as operational. But curious, where you think we could be more efficient using RPA. For example, if I, just perhaps in consultation or something? I don't know.
I don't know if I've got an answer for your question. I think so. I'll kind of say I'm kind of corporate centre kind of person, so I'm not in the front line at all. But what I observe is that when you're working in the front line, you've got to get stuff done now. And I think that we could do more to work in partnership and be mindful of what we're doing to fulfil our just now, and then to ensure that what we've just done doesn't become a problem. I have helped many people who have then gone and had some kind of inquiry or legal case, and the trail isn't cold. So when you've just finished your project and you're on to the next thing, when you close it down, be aware, be mindful of how what is the legacy that you're leaving and what you've created, and how can you pick that up again, so if you needed to. So I think it's thinking more strategically as a whole, rather than I've just got to do my job. It has a tail to it, and it has a life, and that life is more than 20 years. It may be forever. So I think working more collaboratively with I guess corporate centre as well as front when you're doing things would be my plea, I guess.
And Henrika, if we can leave you with the last word.
Last word. Yeah, I was just wondering, because something that we have been doing at the moment is that always when we have these RPA systems, we have to share the knowledge from those like pilots to other departments or agencies, and that is something that I actually wanted to say everybody of you that like share the knowledge that you have got from the pilots or experiments, and like there are so many that we have already tried, but we haven't shared the inputs to the other person. So that's why I think we are also here, that we can share the experiments of our pilots and experiments. So I would recommend everybody to share the work that you are at the moment doing to your colleagues or different agencies or different organizations.